This could be the most dangerous place on Earth. A place of extreme pressure, absolute darkness, paralyzing cold. A world where extreme machines do battle with an extreme environment. A hostile world where humans must be smart to survive. Hold your breath. We're diving deep. The challenge of ocean exploration has always been how to dive deeper, stay down longer, and stay alive, testing our technology and ourselves to the extreme. Most people find holding their breath for 30 seconds difficult, but Umberto Pellizzari can stretch a single breath for up to 7 minutes. Gripping a weight, he plunges to awesome depths, pushing his body to the ultimate limit. More like a seal or dolphin than a man, his heart slows to 1 beat every 2 seconds. Circulation in his arms and legs slows to almost nothing. At these extreme depths, if he were to accidentally open his mouth, the water pressure would punch the air from his lungs. A mask would crush his face. In 1993, he reached a world breath-holding record at an incredible 128 meters. Now, the most dangerous part of the dive begins. The lift bag is his ride to the surface. If he's judged his dive right, he'll reach it before his breath runs out. Many have died trying to set records like this. Pellizzari rides a cloud of expanding air bubbles towards the surface and the oxygen his body so desperately needs. To enter the underwater world, we've had to invent ways of bringing the air with us. The Hardhat diving suit was the first practical solution. Englishman John Dean designed it in the early 1800s, using newly invented powerful pumps to push the air down 30 meters or more below the surface. But diving with this brass helmet is like wearing an upside-down bucket attached to a canvas suit. It's only the pumped air that keeps the water out. If the pump fails, water pressure will try and squash the suit and the diver into the helmet. The alternative is to climb right inside your helmet and seal it behind you. This was the principle behind the world's first deep diving machine, the Bathysphere. On the 11th of August 1934, zoologist William Beebe and engineer Otis Barton found themselves in an ink-black sea, dangling at the end of more than 900 meters of steel cable. For the first time, men stared into the darkness of the abyss and returned to tell their tale. There was no room for error. Thankfully, on this occasion, the Bathysphere was sent down unmanned. One of its quartz windows had leaked. It was a powerful reminder of the immense forces at work in the cold, black depths below. In this century, it's been easier to send a person into space than to the bottom of the ocean. More than 2/3 of the Earth's surface is covered by ocean deeper than Beebe's bathysphere could ever reach. For every 10 meters a diver descends, water pressure will increase with the equivalent weight of another entire atmosphere. By 30 meters, the pressure on the diver's ears and lungs is 4 times greater than at the surface. The nitrogen in his air has penetrated his blood and body tissues like the bubbles trapped in a bottle of soda. From this point down, it's safer to travel by submarine. This 3-man submersible once inspected oil rigs and underwater pipelines. Today, its job is to take tourists on a 300-meter plunge down the spectacular underwater cliff of Grand Cayman Island. The Cayman Wall is the Caribbean's gateway to the abyss. Even in these clear tropical waters, there's not enough light for plant life. Sponges replace corals. The warm seawater cools, beginning to drop towards the icy temperatures of the deep ocean. As we descend, the darkness deepens with every meter. Creatures become strange and unfamiliar. At 240 meters lies the ghostly wreck of the freighter Kirk Pride, lost in a hurricane in the early 1970s, and now perched precariously on the sheer limestone cliff. The beauty down here belies the extreme danger. At 275 meters, the window is holding back 30 atmospheres of pressure and is rapidly reaching its recommended safety depth. The creature beyond the plexiglass is a throwback to prehistoric times. Below this depth, we are entering a world of perpetual night inhabited by creatures beyond our imagination. Down here in the eternal darkness of the abyss, the Earth reveals her secrets. Underwater volcanoes erupt in sulfurous plumes that boil with strange life forms. Less than a dozen submarines have ever reached this alien landscape where the darkness crushes in at close to 400 atmospheres. Even deeper and harder to reach are the deep-sea trenches. Here, with more than 8 kilometers of water above you, it's like the weight of a skyscraper pressing down on your body. Hidden behind a veil of darkness, more than 97% of the ocean floor remains unexplored. But that could soon change if Graham Hawkes has his way. He'll soon be climbing into the egg-shaped pressure sphere of his radical submarine Deep Flight.
It's very much a tight fit, and there's nothing elegant about getting in or out.
By the year 2000, he hopes to fly it to the bottom of the sea.
There's two basic challenges. One is you have to survive the pressure. This one's designed to survive the pressure, but it's light. It's got a lot of energy, and it pushes that performance envelope. So we're trying to do more than just survive the pressure this time. We're trying to go down elegantly and get some real working access to the deep ocean.
The world's first untethered deep diving machine was built in the 1950s by Swiss physicist Auguste Piccard. The first step was to build a steel sphere of immense strength. Its walls were over 10 centimeters thick, the conical windows even thicker. Step 2 was to connect it to a boat-shaped metal balloon filled with aviation fuel. Lighter than the surrounding water, the petrol would allow the craft to rise to the surface. Iron pellets held in place by magnets would make it sink. Piccard called his underwater boat a Bathysphere and named it Trieste, after the city in which it was built. In January 1960, the Trieste was towed into position above the Marianas Trench in the Pacific, manned by Piccard's son Jacques and Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh.
With regard to space in there, we had, 18 to 20 cubic feet of working space for the two people. And Jacques Piccard is I think, about 6.5 feet tall. So we had to sort of coil up inside this thing.
Sealed inside, they began their historic descent. Their aim was to reach the Challenger Deep, the deepest point of all the world's oceans. The bottom lay over 10 kilometers below, as far beneath the Pacific as airliners fly above it. If anything went wrong, their only hope was to jettison their ballast and float slowly back to the surface.
There's no perception of movement unless you looked outside or looked at your gauges. There's a perception of depth for a very simple reason, and that's the extinction of light. As you went down, you began to lose colors, and the last color to go, of course, would be blue. And then gradually you went into shades of gray and then it became dark.
The Trieste dropped steadily downwards. At 6,000 meters, the stresses building up on the water-filled entry tube became too great for the external window. The Trieste rocked violently, but Piccard and Walsh continued their descent. Two hours into the dive, they reached 8,800 meters. They were now as deep under the ocean as Mount Everest is high. Yet still, there were more than 2,000 meters to go.
We took 5.5 hours to go down because we had hit a pinnacle or landed on the slope of a seamount or something we simply didn't know about, that no one knew about. Then we would do a lot of damage.
At 6 minutes past 1 in the afternoon, Piccard and Walsh reached the world's deepest point, almost 11,000 meters down. "11 kilometers of water towered above them. The bathysphere fought back the excruciating pressure.
After we had landed on the bottom, it was like being a bowl of milk. It was just this white cloud was around us. We waited for a half hour. It never did clear off, and then we went back up to the surface.
The iron pellets were released, and this extraordinary machine began its slow drift back to the surface. 3 years later, the Trieste would return to the depths. On April the 10th, 1963, the most advanced American nuclear submarine set out for sea trials off Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
Last man down, bridge is rigged for dive, sir.
Never before had the world seen a machine like the USS Thresher, the world's first hunter-killer submarine. Under captain's orders, the Thresher dropped quietly towards its test depth of 300 meters.
Shut the induction? Shut the induction. Very well.
Inside, the crew began a routine check for minor leaks, confident that the strong steel hull would hold back the immense weight of seawater outside. The hull was sound. It was one small weld on an internal seawater pipe that led to tragedy. The submarine's nuclear reactor was triggered into emergency shutdown. The men knew the procedure. They'd have to wait 7 minutes before the reactor could be brought back online. At this depth, only the sub's forward motion could stop it from sinking. It wasn't enough. The sub stalled, and it began sliding backwards. The USS Thresher slipped past its 300-meter depth limit. A last desperate attempt to blow the ballast tanks failed. A minor emergency had now become a major crisis. Thresher was out of control and sinking towards its crush depth of 450 meters. As she dropped, the cold Atlantic tightened its vice-like grip on the hull, searching for a weak spot. The most extreme machine of its day had succumbed to the Earth's most extreme environment. All 129 men were crushed within moments of the implosion. In 1963, when the Thresher was lost, the deep ocean floor was a secret world barely glimpsed by human eyes. The only submersible capable of searching for the wreckage was the Trieste. But after many long dives, creeping across the sea floor, the Trieste found only a few small pieces of debris. It never did find the ruptured hull of the Thresher. Today, there are craft much better suited to the task. This is the deep submergence vessel, Alvin, operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. More than any submarine before or since, Alvin has revolutionized our understanding of the deep sea. And like the machines that went before it, this underwater workhorse is still basically a pressure sphere.
The sphere itself is this piece right here. It's the only part of the submarine of any size that's really pressure proof. It's 7 feet in diameter, 2 inches thick, made out of titanium.
Like Trieste, its 5 small portholes are made of plexiglass more than 10 centimeters thick. Heavy iron weights assist the descent. They'll be jettisoned on the bottom when the dive is over. 200 days a year, a crew of 3, 1 pilot and 2 observers, climb aboard Alvin to undertake scientific missions. For most dives, they'll spend 8 or 9 hours in there. The submarine is neutrally buoyant, designed so that the weight of the iron and the lead-acid batteries is exactly balanced by its flotation devices. Alvin's titanium pressure sphere can safely withstand depths approaching 4,000 meters, giving it access to more than 90% of the sea floor. Time and again, Alvin has dived deep into the alien world of the abyss and into the scientific history books. Here are creatures that no one had ever seen, in a landscape few had expected. Geysers of black smoke billow out of vents in the sulfur-encrusted rocks. Alvin must navigate carefully around these plumes. Their intense heat could easily melt the glass in her portholes. In 1985, human eyes gazed on the Titanic for the first time in 70 years. Lying in over 3 kilometers of water, it was these images of the Titanic, rusting quietly on the sea floor, that finally brought Alvin the public recognition it deserved. Alvin is probably the most successful submersible there's ever been. It's 30 years old, with more than 3,000 successful dives to its credit. Worldwide, just 6 other submersibles are capable of reaching into the abyss, all following Alvin's same basic design.
Woo! Just a little bit of weather here.
The extreme demands of such deep diving make these machines expensive to build and even more costly to operate and support. Fortunately for the rest of us, there are cheaper ways of voyaging to the bottom of the sea. It's now possible for anyone who dares to see the underwater world for themselves. Here, in Freeport, Bahamas, day trippers can take the plunge inside the transparent hull of Deep Star and into the strange blue world of the deep coral reef. This small piece of the submarine's thick plastic hull is a reminder of just what it takes to be safe 30 meters below the waves. Using cylinders of compressed air, modern scuba gear supplies a diver with a lungful of air at the same pressure as the surrounding seawater. This technological advance has helped millions to explore the secret underwater world. Like wristwatch dive computers and buoyancy adjusting jackets, humans can become half man, half fish, if only for a limited period. But there is a more sinister presence down here, one that rarely needs to surface. During the Cold War, the race for technology turned submarines into the awesome predators they are today. Nuclear reactors finally gave submariners what they wanted most: total independence from the atmosphere above. Ballistic missile submarines circle the globe, remaining underwater for as long as their food supplies last. So too do the attack submarines hunting them. The game for both is to remain hidden until the last possible moment. This is the Uss Scranton, a Los Angeles-class fast attack submarine. Today, it's on training maneuvers.
Keep the watch on the one MC. Dive, 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 dive. Dive, dive. Come on, crew, Benson.
Solid maneuvering on it.
Bounce like Benson to get open. 3-1. 3-2.
Sealed off from the world above, the Scranton must be totally self-sufficient.
The submarines of World War II were surface ships that submerged. Today, with the advent of nuclear power, these are true submersibles that remain submerged. And with nuclear power, we have endurance, mobility, stealth.
And battle stance, method, the Raytheon radar carried on RE the warship, signal strength 3.
Mission Attack Center, I hold an armed warship at narrow angle on the bow at a range of 12,000 yards. It is a destroyer.
Orange destroyer bearing 152, range 12,000, over. Scranton engaged 6052 with torpedoes, over.
It's my intention to engage the destroyer with a narrow angle on the bow at a range of 8,000 yards using a single Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo. Any questions? Weapons officer, make tubes 1 and 2 ready in all respects.
Aye, sir. CLC, torpedo room, flood and equalize, tubes 1 and 2.
Flood down, equalize, tube 2.
Flood down, equalize, tube 2, aye.
Bearing, mark, downscope. 151.3. Max. Range, 1 division, high power.
Range, 8,000 yards.
Angle on the bow, port, 20. Check. Captain, I have a firing solution.
Cam, tube 1's ready in all respects. Target is within weapons range. CLC, torpedo room, open the muzzle door.
Open the outer doors on tube 2.
Open the outer doors on tube 2, aye.
Bearing, mark. Now 50.2.
Shoot!
Stay air.
Weapon enabled.
Look around, number 2 scope.
Acquisition, bearing 153, range 7500, course 121, speed 20.
Torpedo has exploded under the contact. The warship is breaking up and sinking.
One more wreck settles on the bottom. One more reason for Captain Billy Deans to head out to sea. Deans is one of the new breed of recreational aquanauts, a technical diver.
I believe technical diving is the next natural evolution in diving, where man is optimizing his breathing gases and technology to allow him to go to deeper depths with an extremely high degree of